Arrest her. He didn't whisper it. He said it like it had already been decided, like the courtroom was simply the paperwork stage of something that had been settled long before I walked through those doors. My name is Margaret Calloway. I am 57 years old. And the man who said those words had spent 4 months building a case against me that he believed was airtight. He was wrong. He just didn't know it yet. Let me take you back to where this actually started. Not the courtroom, not the arrest. Further back than that, to a Tuesday night in October, a phone ringing in my Virginia house at 9 p.m., and a voice I didn't recognize telling me something I want you to understand clearly. He didn't ask. He informed. His name was Douglas Hale, property developer. The kind of wealthy that stops being about money and starts being about what money allows you to do to people. He told me I had 48 hours to sign over a 12-acre property I owned in West Virginia, land that had belonged to my mother, land I had no intention of selling, or he would ensure that certain documents reached certain journalists. What documents? I asked. He described them. 6 years of fabricated financial fraud, shell companies, false invoicing, a paper trail constructed to look like the career of a corrupt government official. My career, constructed to look corrupt. I listened to the entire description without interrupting. Then I said, I won't be signing anything. He said, you'll regret that. 4 weeks later, I was in handcuffs in an Arlington processing room watching a young officer take my fingerprints. And I was already working. Here is what Douglas Hale did not know about me. I spent 26 years in federal intelligence. Not field work architecture. I designed the systems. The financial monitoring networks, the audit frameworks, the paper trail detection tools that agencies across 3 branches of government used to identify exactly the kind of fraud I was now being accused of. I built the systems, which meant that when I sat down with the fabricated documentation package, 340 pages of carefully constructed lies, I knew within 2 hours exactly what I was looking at. Not because it was obvious. It wasn't. It was genuinely good work, expensive, professional, the product of someone who understood how these systems operated. But understanding how something operates and understanding how something was built are different things. And whoever constructed this had made mistakes. Small ones, precise ones. The kind of mistakes you only make when you know enough to be dangerous, but not quite enough to be perfect. I had seen that pattern before, not in a report, not in a case file. In a person. I just needed to be certain. My attorney was Patricia Osa, 63 years old, 4 decades in federal courtrooms, the kind of legal mind that doesn't perform confidence, it simply operates with a precision that makes confidence irrelevant. She met me the morning after my arrest, read the full documentation package for 40 minutes without speaking, and then looked up. This is excellent construction, she said. As I know. Expensive. I know that too. Someone with specific knowledge of government financial architecture built this. She set the papers down, not a contractor, someone who lived inside these systems. Yes, I said. Do you know who? I had a name forming. Not confirmed, yet forming. 3 weeks of quiet observation pointing in one direction, but not yet with the certainty I required before I said it out loud. Give me 60 days, I said. Margaret, Her voice was careful. "You are the defendant in a federal fraud case. You cannot." "I'm going to have conversations," I said, "with people I know, about things I'm naturally curious about as an innocent person trying to understand what happened to her." Patricia looked at me for a long moment. "Everything you find comes to me," she said. "Everything relevant." "Everything." I held her gaze. "Everything relevant," I said. She chose not to escalate it. Smart woman. The name I had was Victor Slade. 11 years working parallel to my division. Never in my direct chain, close enough to understand how my work functioned, far enough that no one would immediately draw the connection. He had the knowledge. What I needed was the motive. Day 1 through 20, I built the picture carefully: his career trajectory, his financial pattern, the decisions he had made in the final years of his service. Nothing conclusive. Suggestive threads, but nothing I could hand to Patricia with confidence. Day 23, I thought I had it wrong. The financial pattern I had been following went cold. The account structure I had identified, as his didn't hold up under the verification, I ran through a source I won't name. I sat in my Virginia house at midnight looking at 3 weeks of work, and considering the possibility that I had been so certain about Victor Slade that I had bent the evidence toward him rather than following it honestly. That is the most dangerous mistake in this kind of work. I had taught it to other people for 20 years. I spent 2 days starting over. Clean, no assumptions. Just the 3 mistakes in the fabricated documentation and the question of who could have made them. On day 26, I found the 3rd inconsistency. A specific accounting notation, a way of formatting interagency transfers that had been standard practice in my division for a particular 3-year window, then updated. The fabricated documents used the old format. Correctly, for the years it applied to, but then continued using it for 1 year beyond the update. A mistake only someone who had learned the system during that specific window would make. Victor Slade had joined the parallel division 14 months before the update. He had learned the old format, had never fully internalized the new one. That was the 3rd inconsistency. And everything shifted. The motive took another 2 weeks. When I found it, it was simpler and more depressing than I had imagined. Victor Slade had his own exposure. Real exposure, not fabricated. Financial decisions made in the final years of his service that had left him genuinely vulnerable to the kind of investigation he was now helping to direct at me. Douglas Hale had found it, had offered him a transaction. Build the case against Margaret Calloway, make it convincing enough to force the property's sale. Your problem disappears. One man's real crime, used as the instrument to manufacture another woman's false one. I gave Patricia the full thread on day 41. She read it without speaking for 30 minutes. Then she looked up. "The prosecution's financial evidence collapses," she said. "The records were built by a man who is now demonstrably criminal with a direct financial motive to fabricate." Yes. This isn't a weekend case. This is no case. Yes. She set the papers down. How did you? Conversations, I said. She didn't ask for more detail. There was one more thing. I had found it on day 38 and held it back, not from Patricia, but from myself, while I verified it fully. Because what it meant was larger than my case. larger than Douglas Hale's property ambitions. The West Virginia land sat above a watershed. A specific watershed feeding into a water table serving 4 counties. Approximately 200,000 people. The resort development Hale had proposed publicly was the visible layer. The actual plan, documents I obtained through a source I will not name, involved mineral extraction that would have contaminated that watershed within 3 years of commencement. He wasn't trying to build a resort. He was trying to access what was beneath the ground in a way that would poison the water supply of 200,000 people. Hidden behind a legitimate development that no planning commission would look at twice. The property was never about the property. I gave Patricia this on the morning of the hearing. She read it, set it down, looked at me with the expression of someone recalibrating the entire shape of what they had been working on. Margaret, this isn't a fraud case anymore. No, I said, it isn't. Environmental endangerment, public health violation, coordinated criminal conspiracy. She paused. Did you know this at the start? I suspected it, I said. I needed to confirm it. And you confirmed it through conversations, I said, with people I know. She closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Opened them. Are we ready for this morning? I asked. We are ready, she said. The courtroom filled early. Douglas Hale arrived at 9:15, 3 rows back, 2 attorneys flanking him, a third on his phone nearby. He wore the confidence of a man who had used this machinery before and had no reason to believe it would perform differently today. He looked at me once across the room. I looked back. He looked away first. Victor Slade was not present. Victor Slade had been in a room with federal investigators for 72 hours. He had entered believing he was providing testimony against me. He had remained when the investigators began asking entirely different questions about watershed rights, mineral permits, and the construction of fabricated financial documentation. He had not left that room yet. The prosecution team arranged their materials with the efficiency of people who believed they had a strong case. They had not yet been fully informed about Victor Slade. They were about to be. Judge Claire Maddox entered at 9:31. 61 years old, 22 years on the federal bench. The particular stillness of someone who has heard every argument in every variation and has stopped being surprised by any of them. She sat, opened the file. Patricia had submitted the evidentiary package at 7 a.m., the complete thread, Victor Slade's documented exposure and motive, the mineral extraction plan, the watershed contamination risk. Everything. Filed properly, time-stamped, attached to the formal dismissal motion. The judge had had 2 hours with it. The prosecution had had 40 minutes. I watched the lead prosecutor, Richard Ellery, careful and competent, a man I did not believe was corrupt, simply misled, receive a note from his assistant. Watched him read it. Watched something shift in his face as the note's contents landed. He stood. Your Honor, we'd request a brief recess to review. Mr. Ellery, Judge Maddox did not look up. I have reviewed the submission. I have reviewed the evidentiary foundation of the charges. I have reviewed the documented relationship between the primary evidence source and the interests of the complaining party. She turned a page. I don't require a recess. Your Honor, if we could have just. Mr. Ellery. He stopped. She read for another 30 seconds. The courtroom had gone completely still, the particular stillness of 200 people simultaneously holding their breath. Then, without looking up, without drama, in the flat, even tone of someone stating a conclusion that the evidence had already made inevitable, she said, "Case dismissed." 2 words. No speech, no elaboration, no moment of performed satisfaction. Just 2 words and a page turned. Behind me, the room broke open, confused voices, urgent whispers, the sound of Douglas Hale's attorneys closing in around him, with the rapid quiet of people managing a situation that had just become significantly more serious than a dismissed civil case. I heard Hale's voice once, raised, insistent, the voice of a man who had not yet accepted what had just happened. I did not turn around. Patricia touched my arm briefly. I gathered my papers, stood, walked out. I was at the courthouse exit when I heard it. Raised voices from the parking structure. The particular sharp tone of an exchange that was not going the way one of the participants had expected. By the time I reached the top of the parking ramp, Douglas Hale was in handcuffs. Not fraud charges. The charges were considerably more serious. I watched for exactly 3 seconds. Then I walked to my car. Victor Slade signed a cooperation agreement 2 days later. The West Virginia property remains mine. The watershed remains clean. I am back in the Virginia house. The garden is coming along, slowly, imperfectly, the way things grow when you are still learning how to tend them. The mornings are good. The light through the eastern windows is still the reason I chose this place. A letter arrived 10 days after the dismissal. No return address. Inside, a single card. 6 words in handwriting I didn't recognize. "We knew you'd handle it. Well done." I don't know who sent it. I have my suspicions. I put it in the drawer where I keep things that don't need to be shown to anyone else, and went back to the garden. Some people spend their lives building lies, constructing false paper trails, false histories, false cases against people they have decided are obstacles. I spent 26 years building the systems that find them. They should have checked who they were filing charges against. 2 words, no drama, no speech. Case dismissed, and the man who started it all was in handcuffs before he reached his car. Have you ever been targeted by someone who completely misjudged who they were dealing with? Tell me below, and if you know someone who has been wrongly accused and refused to break, send this to them. They'll know exactly what it means.